Hello there, and welcome to part 4 of my series in which I discuss the reasons why I thought I might be autistic, which actually led to me getting a late diagnosis earlier this year. And it might seem like an overwhelming amount of information, but I think it just really evidences the amount of kind of thought processes that you have to go through in order to become either a self-realised autistic person or self-identified, or to go for a formal assessment. It just makes me feel really frustrated when you hear somebody say everybody's autistic these days, when actually they're completely unaware of all the kind of self-evaluation that we have to go through. Yeah, it's not an easy process, and it's certainly not an overnight process either. So anyway, let's get started. Reason number 1 is unusual ways of speaking or formal speech. And this is something that's been really evident throughout my whole history. I've mentioned before that I was brought up in a Scottish family, so I did have a Scots accent when I was young, but through masking I soon had an English accent at school, and the English accent just kind of overtook the Scottish accent until, I just speak with an English accent now. But my speech has always been quite formal in its structure, and I don't have many kind of clues as to having a kind of regional accent, so I sounded almost posher than my peers or contemporaries, and I'm certainly not from a posh family, but it's just something that my brain's just done, really. And I've often struggled with more casual language or kind of colloquial language, and I've just had a very kind of formal way of speaking. It has relaxed over maybe the last kind of decade or two, so I'll use kind of more slang words, etc. But I really struggled with that when I was young, and it was something that was often picked up by my peers, that I sounded sort of quite geeky, really. So it certainly felt like a clue when I was going through my kind of self-evaluation, really, because it's actually really common in autistic people to develop a formal way of speaking, or to have an accent that's somehow out of kilter within the kind of locality, really. Reason number 2 is a common one for autistic people, and it's shutdowns. And I've certainly had lots of experiences in terms of shutting down. And the one example that's coming to mind is that I know a lot of people will talk about the Sunday scaries because they've got work the next day, and they're starting to feel a bit kind of like, oh, I don't want to go to work tomorrow. How is the weekend nearly over? And gosh, I've had the Sunday scaries with bells on, because I've often struggled in jobs, which I've talked about in a previous video. I would often have my version of the Sunday scaries, but it would get to a point where Ian would be really worried because I was almost non-responsive, or actually non-responsive some of the time, and he'd often think that he'd done something wrong, or he'd offended me somehow, because I just would become almost catatonic in that I would be staring off into space and just not able to hear him, really. It's like my brain would just shut down, and it was pure anxiety, and it was the only way that I kind of knew how to cope, really. I'd be so worried about the following day, and I would either be thinking of kind of worst case scenarios for the following day, or I'd be thinking of nothing at all. It was really stressful, and I feel really bad for Ian that this was a common scenario on a Sunday. And yeah, it was something that I certainly added to the list while I was going through my kind of self-evaluation, because it just felt very unusual behaviour, really. Reason number 3 is, gosh, how would I describe it? It's like a combination of perfectionism, a fear of failure, and having to be right all of the time. And this is a really stressful combination, and it's presented itself in many ways in my life. And I think it probably ties in with masking in many ways. I've been a high masking autistic person throughout my life, and we want to present a highly curated version of ourselves to the outside world, and there's many reasons for that. We want to fit in, we want to avoid any opportunity to be bullied or to be picked on. And I think that in itself really encourages perfectionism, which is really destructive, isn't it? And because of this fear of failure, I've kind of quietened down so many aspects of myself, really. And thinking about social media, actually, I've always been astonished and in complete awe of people that have been able to kind of, I don't know, tweet out their thoughts without having to put actually much thought into kind of what they're typing, because I would agonise for ages over just sending a tweet out into the world about my artwork or something like that. And I've, yeah, just always had to go through various kind of stumbling blocks almost within my mind before I would allow myself to even say anything to the world. So it feels really weird and interesting talking to you here on YouTube, because I'm always scared of getting things wrong. And I have to put so much time and effort into editing my videos because I just overanalyze everything I say. And it's, yeah, really exhausting. And I see other people doing live streams, and I'm just in awe of how they're able just to allow themselves to say words in the here and now. I'd love to be able to do that. And hopefully, the longer I'm able to talk about my experience of being autistic, perhaps this will become a bit easier, or I'll be a bit easier on myself, because yeah, it's really self-limiting, this way of thinking. Maybe it's something that I'll build up to at some point, you never know. I think it's all about confidence, really, isn't it? And I've always struggled in that area. So yeah, fear of failure is a biggie for me. Reason number 4 is a love of organisation, and this is a really stereotypical autistic trait, isn't it? But I wanted to include it because I did have a discussion about this with my autism assessor, so it is part of the diagnostic process for many of us. And I've always loved, although I haven't always been super successful with it, but I've always loved being super organised about things, but only specific things actually. But when my partner and I moved in together, we just stored all of our CD collection just in the spare room, and because we rarely listened to them, they were kind of like just all kind of jumbled together. And I can't tell you the amount of angst that gave me. And I just hated looking at this pile of CDs, because I just thought, if I wanted to listen to a specific CD, how on earth would I ever find it in there? And I spent about 3 days organising all of these CDs into alphabetical order, even though the chances of me wanting to go and actually find a physical CD are minimal, because I've added them all to my Apple playlist, but it just caused me real issues. And you'll see here all of my clay models are all super organised as well. Just can't bear the thought of things just being out of kilter, really. And interestingly, my assessor could see all of this while I was doing my kind of video assessment with her. And yeah, she made comment about that. So I just like things to be super organised, and I really need to be able to find things. And this was a real problem when Ian and I moved in together, because I'm super organised. The flat that I had when I lived on my own was, well, I could tell you where everything was in that flat, but Ian is yeah, he's quite messy by comparison, and it caused me a lot of yeah, a lot of internal stress, I have to say. But it has meant that I've had to compromise in living with a kind of messier person. But for me, as long as my studio is 100% organised, it really helps me in terms of my own mental health, I have to say. Reason number 5 is a special interest in body language, and this is something that has just always fascinated me, and it only now makes sense that my brain was just trying to learn how autistic people deal with life so that I could mimic it in many ways. And I've spent many an hour of my life people watching, whether it be in social situations or if I've just stopped for a coffee somewhere, and I'll just be analysing every person that passes me, and just looking at other people talking and how they present to each other, their gestures, their facial movements. And even as a youngster, I would spend a lot of my time looking in the mirror, making different kind of facial expressions or different gestures, really to see what it looked like and whether I thought I was doing a good job of mimicking other people. And it's just fascinating to look back now as a diagnosed autistic person to see all of these clues, and this certainly was a massive one. It's something that I've just always been interested in, and had I not done a degree in the arts, I think psychology would have come in as a close second, really. In fact, I just remembered that I did actually start an open university degree in my early 30s actually, but it didn't take me long to decide that arts was really the way that I wanted to go forward. But yeah, it's certainly interested me a lot throughout my life, and I've spent many an hour watching YouTube videos on body language. I just find it fascinating, really. Reason number 6 is showing inappropriate emotions within a moment that you should have had a completely different reaction to, really. And yeah, this is something that has cropped up a few times for me, and it causes me real embarrassment. But as an example, I used to work in a charity, and on a couple of occasions, my boss would give me bad news. And the example that I'm thinking of was that she told me that somebody within the sector had died. And I knew that person sort of fairly well, but my first reaction was just to burst out laughing, and it just came out of nowhere. I don't know why on earth I reacted like that, but sometimes when news is just so big and dramatic, I just don't know how to respond to it in the moment. It's the only way that I can describe it, really. Thankfully, my boss was really understanding. She's a trained counsellor, so she's very used to dealing with people showing odd behaviour here and there, really. But I was just kind of a bit mortified, really, that somebody would think that, that's my first reaction, to start laughing that somebody's died. It was yeah, I'm just so thankful that she knew me so well, really. But it's something that has come up here and there, and I don't know why my brain does it. It's almost like my brain's been confronted with such dramatic news within a moment that just doesn't know how to respond, and it's kind of searching for a response, and that is the one that's come to the surface, really. So yeah, it's certainly been really confusing for me as to why that's happened. But yeah, it's happened a few times, I have to say. Reason number 7 is the need to have a whole lot of time alone, and I'm sure a lot of you will be able to relate to this one. It's probably a trait that unites all of us, really, or the vast majority of us anyway. I just find people and life and work just exhausting, and I've had to seek solace mainly in bed, actually. Throughout my whole life, I've spent so much time in bed, having to just try and kind of zone out and self-regulate and just feel comfortable, to almost have a safety kind of cocoon away from other people. It's just imperative for my whole survival, really. And because of that, I value a really comfortable bed above most things in life, really. I just need to be able to go and feel safe and secure and to calm all of my kind of sensory needs. It's just so important. And even now, my partner and I really get on, but I still need a lot of time to myself, and just to be able to go off into the bedroom and just to go off into my own world for a bit is just, it's crucial, really. It's so important. And when I think about times in life that I've been really stressed, and it's mainly to do with work, I'd often come home and go straight to bed and just not want to leave it for the entire evening, really. And even for whole weekends, I've just gone to bed on a Friday and just basically camped out within my bed, because it's the only place that I felt kind of safe and secure. And the thought of having to give that up and go into the world and do stuff has just been too much to bear some weekends. There's a lot of traffic noise going on now because it's raining outside, so apologies if you can hear background noise. Reason number 8 is restricted diets, or sticking to very similar foods, and this is something that's definitely been relevant for me throughout my life, and particularly when I was young. Actually, I just really struggled to eat kind of normal food, and just wanted to kind of eat crisps and pickled onions from my memory. But I think I'll save that particular story for maybe a conversation around traits in girls. But I've always really enjoyed sticking to kind of similar foods. I'm not as restricted as some other autistic people, but I've definitely stuck to a range of foods, and very rarely have kind of gone beyond those. And Ian made an observation that was quite interesting, that whenever we used to go out for dinner, and I say we used to because we can't now because I've got mast cell activation syndrome, so I just can't eat out anymore. But whenever we'd go out to dinner, I'd very often order Hunter's chicken, and I'd get the meal and I'd moan that I didn't like it because it would have, I don't know, some flavour within it that I just didn't like. And Ian would say to me, "Why on earth do you always order this meal and you don't even like it?" And I think in hindsight, I would order the chicken because I liked chicken, and that would be the first thoughts in my head. You know, this is a chicken dish, so I'm going to like it. But I would just struggle with the whole concept that it would come with, you know, a sauce and other stuff within it that I just couldn't get on with. And I don't even know if this is making any sense whatsoever, but I think my thought process was so rigid that I, you know, wanted chicken, that I would order the chicken assuming that I'd get on with it each and every time, but very rarely did I enjoy it. It's just, yeah, just an odd thing that I did, and I still don't really understand why, really. I think this became a bit easier eating out when Ian and I became vegetarian for a while, because it just removed the whole choice of chicken from me. And in recent years, I've developed MCAS, so I have a very limited range of foods, because the vast majority of food will give me like an allergic reaction, really. So yeah, it's a tricky one. Reason number 9 is selective mutism. This is actually quite a well-known autistic trait, but not all autistic people will experience selective mutism, but it's something that I've certainly dealt with, but mainly in my younger years as a child. And I spoke about this on my video about driving, I think, but when I was young, I found it really difficult to sit in a car and have to talk to people. I just found it impossible. I think because I'm such a nervous passenger, all that I can do is focus on my environment and what's happening, and I'm so focused on the speed and just everything that's happening around the car that I can't quite hear people that are talking to me, or certainly that's how I experienced it when I was young. I just would not be able to do all of these things at once, really. It was like my brain was being asked to multitask, but I just was not able to do it, and it was a bit awkward, I have to say, but I just found it too difficult, and it's just, when we think about it, it's an anxiety response. It's too much, or your brain's having too much to contend with in any given moment. So it's decided that something has to shut down, and in many cases, it's the ability to talk. And the last one for today, reason number 10, is feeling confused with sayings and idioms and metaphors and all of the like, really. And to give you an example, a little while ago, Ian got a new Parker coat, and he came bursting into my studio after a dog walk and said, "I've just gone flying in my new coat." And I was just like, what? How have you been flying? And it's just so ridiculous, isn't it? I honestly, it took me a good minute or two to even try and understand what he was saying. So basically, he and John Paul had come walking down quite a muddy hill. It was during the winter, and he'd fallen over and got mud all up the back of his new coat. So he was understandably really upset, but it was it was just super confusing. There was like a real kind of disconnect between what he was saying and what I was trying to receive as information, really. And this has happened time and time again throughout my life. It's a very confusing world for autistic people at times, isn't it? And let me know if you've had any similar experiences to those, because I imagine there's plenty of them. So there we have it. There's 10 more reasons why I thought I was autistic, which ultimately led to me getting a diagnosis. And I've certainly got a lot more reasons why on my list here. So I don't doubt there'll be a part 5 at some point. So what I'll do is to leave the playlist down below for you if you've not seen the other videos. So yeah, let me know if you can relate to any of the traits or any of the reasons I've given today. Thanks for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.